My son emptied my bank account and traveled to London with his wife and mother-in-law. Days later, my son called me crying, "What did you do? I hate you." I was folding towels when the phone lit up. One small screen, one hard line of truth. Available balance, $0. I stared until the numbers blurred, refreshed the app, waited for the balance to climb back like a heartbeat that forgot its job. Nothing moved. My hands didn't shake because I'm old. They shook because something inside me recognized what I didn't want to name. I called the bank. The cheerful voice thanked me for my patience like I was standing in a bakery line and not on the edge of a cliff. A young man came on and read the note on his screen, each word careful, like it had teeth. 5 wire transfers, ma'am. Total, $81,340. Authorized via joint access. Joint? Whose name? He cleared his throat. Michael Andrew Monroe. My son. He asked if I wanted to file a fraud report. I couldn't make my mouth choose a word that called my child a thief. I thanked him and hung up. The house went quiet in that way that makes sound feel like an intruder. The refrigerator hummed. The second hand on the wall clock tapped the same spot over and over like a question it couldn't solve. The landline rang. Doris from next door. Her news travels faster than weather. "Ellie, baby? You're Michael? He's in London, with Lauren. And that mother of hers, the one who talks like she rents heaven by the hour. Oh, they look like they own the Thames." I reached into the drawer for the old phone, the one with the cracked corner and the stubborn camera. Searched his name. There he was. White shirt, a glass raised to a cloudy London sky. Lauren's hand curved under his chin like a label, like a claim. Candace's sunglasses reflecting a skyline I've never stood under. Caption: London, my new beginning. I deserve this. Lauren replied, "Right place, right time. Thank you, Mom." With a money bag for punctuation. That emoji landed harder than the empty account. Because it meant the taking wasn't a secret. It was a celebration. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I just felt my mouth learn a new shape. A small, thin smile. Not forgiveness. Understanding. I lowered myself into the old plaid armchair I bought when Michael was 7. Back then, I cleaned houses that smelled like lemon oil and polished pride. I used to sit in this chair and rub the ache out of my feet until my fingers went numb. I told myself it was worth it. Someday he would make it easier. I looked at the framed photo above the TV. Michael in his cap and gown, me in the blue dress I wore to weddings and funerals, and anything that demanded dignity I had to buy on sale. He promised to take care of me. Promises sound like lullabies when you need sleep. They sound different when you wake up alone. Memory came back like a tide, slow, and then all at once. His first bike, the one I bought after I sold the good earrings. He fell and scraped both knees. I told him he'd never fall again. I don't know why mothers lie like that. Maybe we think if we say it, the ground will listen. I thought of the patch of Georgia dirt my daddy left me, sold it cheap to pay Michael's college deposit. I didn't know the cost of the thing I didn't keep. I remembered the first time I met Lauren. A smile sharp enough to cut a ribbon. Nails like she carried warnings on her hands. Her mother, Candace, walking through my little kitchen like a realtor showing a listing she wouldn't buy. "What a charming space," she said, eyes on my old stove. "Very rustic." Rustic is the word people use when they want to step over something without looking rude. Back then, Michael laughed at the right times and kissed my cheek on the way out. Now he was across an ocean making toasts with the last of my safety. I made tea I didn't drink and set the cup down where a ring would form and remember me after I was gone. In my notebook, the one with recipes and grocery lists that add up to more month than money, I wrote 3 lines. "This is not the end. This is the beginning of my silence. My silence will hurt more than any scream." I underlined each sentence like I was carving a path. I went to bed with the phone face down. Sleep stood at the door and shook its head no. So I lay there and watched the dark practice being a wall. At dawn, I decided to stop guessing and start counting. I walked 2 doors down to Brenda's porch. Brenda keeps books balanced the way I keep floors clean. She taught corporate men how to count without crying. Now she teaches neighborhood children how to trust numbers that don't love them back. I told her I needed to see what I couldn't see. She opened the bank portal on my small, stubborn phone, showed me where the transfers lived, the dates, the times, the reasons typed like excuses. And then I saw it, my name beside joint owner, Michael A. Monroe. A signature that wore my letters like a mask. I didn't make a sound. Brenda printed everything and stapled the pages into something heavier than shock. I ran my finger over the ink my hand didn't make and felt the old part of me, the soft water part, pull back like a tide had turned and wasn't coming home. I walked past the clinic for a thing that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with time. Dr. Harris looked at me with the kind of kindness that comes after bad news has been practiced in the mirror. Leukemia. Advanced. 6 months if I do nothing. Maybe more if I let machines and chemicals bargain with my bones. Will the treatment take my dignity faster? I asked. He didn't answer the way words do. He answered the way eyes do. I thanked him and went home under a sky that didn't change for anyone's diagnosis. In the bathroom mirror, I tied a black headband over hair that had already started to loosen from the root. I studied my face until I recognized the woman looking back. I said, "Now you look like who you are." I knocked on Walter's door at dusk. Walter and I used to be 17 together. He keeps his law license in a drawer with old photos and a paperclip that won't bend. He read the printouts. He didn't talk for a minute. Then he exhaled a low whistle that didn't belong to a song. "There's a way," he said softly. "Elder financial abuse. Banks listen when a certain box gets checked. If we file today, they can freeze. The hold buys time. Time buys you a plan. Mercy comes later," I said. "This part is for learning." He nodded like he'd been waiting years for me to say a sentence like that. We filed. Brenda notarized. Walter emailed a name he'd once had coffee with back when hope was still a habit. By evening, a new email clicked open on his screen. Words stiff and perfect. Provisional hold initiated. Review within 72 hours. I didn't know what London would feel like when a card said no. But I knew what my kitchen felt like when the world finally turned my way. I walked to the corner store and bought a red notebook with lines that could hold the weight of a promise. On the first page, I wrote, "To my son. This is not revenge. This is the only love I have left that still teaches." I closed the notebook and set it beside the untouched tea and the folded towels and the life I had built like a bridge no one noticed until they tried to burn it. Night pressed against the window. The house creaked its old soft song. I leaned back in the plaid chair and let my body remember resting. Somewhere across the ocean, a man I raised held up a glass and called theft a beginning. Somewhere inside my chest, a woman I had been too long sat down and finally stood up. Tomorrow would ask for courage. Tonight asked for breath. I gave it what I had left. Sleep didn't come, but memories did. They came in waves, quiet but sharp. The kind of memories that smell like old detergent and sound like a child laughing through hunger. I was 14 the first time I cleaned someone else's kitchen. A house up in Brentwood, big enough to hold my whole neighborhood inside. The woman of the house used to leave lipstick stains on her coffee cups. My job was to wash them off before her husband came home. That was the rule. No evidence of being human. By 16, I could tell a family's secrets from the way their closets smelled. Some closets smelled like love, others smelled like perfume trying to cover fear. But I never told anyone what I saw. I just cleaned. That's what poor girls do when the world won't let them speak. They scrub. When I was 17, I met Eddie Monroe. He had eyes that made me forget what bills were. He said, "You deserve more than bleach burns and backaches." I believed him because girls like me are trained to. By 19, I was carrying Michael. By 20, Eddie was gone. He left with a girl who sold Avon and a car he didn't finish paying for. I never saw him again. I remember that night like thunder. The rain hit the roof hard enough to sound like applause. Maybe heaven was clapping because it knew what kind of woman I was about to become. I raised Michael alone, tied him to my back with a towel when I scrubbed floors. He'd giggle every time the mop splashed water on his feet. I'd hum lullabies between vacuum runs. No crib, no baby monitor, just love and a promise I couldn't break. I remember feeding him oatmeal from an old jelly jar, whispering, "Someday, baby, you'll eat from plates that shine." When he turned 6, one of my clients, a rich woman with a kind smile and cruel eyes, offered to pay for his private school if I worked full-time and lived in. I said yes, before thinking. The first night I slept in her attic apartment, I heard laughter downstairs, the kind that sounds expensive. It reminded me what I was fighting for. Every Friday, I'd take 2 buses back to South Central just to see Michael. I'd bring him little gifts, a notebook, a snack, sometimes just a hug that had waited too long to be given. He'd run toward me shouting, "Mama!" His voice was my paycheck. Every single week. Years passed like laundry cycles. Wash, rinse, repeat. I learned how to iron dress shirts with creases sharp enough to cut pride. I learned that some people don't thank you until you're gone. And I learned that love for a child is both a seed and a sentence. It grows wild, and it keeps you chained to the garden. When Michael was 15, he told me, "Mama, when I make it big, you'll never clean another house." I smiled because I'd heard it before. But hearing it from him made it sound holy. By 21, he was in college, something no Monroe had done before. I sold my father's last patch of land in Georgia to pay the fee, a place I used to dream about building a small cabin on, gone with one signature and a shaky hand. "Don't worry, Mama," he said. "I'll buy it back someday." He never did, but back then he was still my boy, the one who called me every Sunday and ended every call with, "Love you, old lady." I didn't care that he called me old. At least he still called. Then came Lauren, the girl with a smile that never reached her eyes. He met her in his 3rd semester. She was studying marketing, whatever that meant. To me, it just meant she knew how to sell ideas, even the bad ones. The first time I met her, she shook my hand like it was business. "Mrs. Monroe," she said, as if she wasn't sure I deserved the title. I told her to call me Ellie. She didn't. Her mother, Candace, was another story. Walked into my home with sunglasses still on, even though the blinds were open and the sun was soft. She looked around and smiled the way people smile when they find something smaller than expected. "This is so humble," she said. Lauren laughed. Michael looked away. I made them dinner, collard greens, cornbread, and fried chicken. Candace picked at her plate like she was afraid the food would stain her pedigree. Lauren scrolled her phone between bites. Michael tried to talk about his internship, but every time he said something proud, Lauren interrupted to correct him. After they left, I washed the dishes and looked at the grease circles in the sink. Each one felt like a warning I hadn't read in time. The years between then and the day I lost everything, they blurred. Lauren took more space in his world. I took less. At first, I told myself it was natural, that children grow up and mothers learn to be quiet. But silence became exile. I wasn't invited to birthdays. Didn't know when they moved into their new place. Sometimes I'd see photos online, dinner parties, vacations, smiles too white to be real. Every picture had Lauren's caption, "Manifesting the life we deserve." And there he was beside her, manifesting my savings. A week before the theft, I'd gone to his apartment in Studio City. I cooked his favorite pot roast, walked 3 blocks because the bus didn't stop close. I rang the bell and waited. No answer. The security guard came over. Polite, but firm. Are you Mrs. Monroe? Yes, I'm his mother. He hesitated. I'm sorry, ma'am. I was instructed not to let you up unless he expects you. I stood there with a casserole cooling in my hands. By who? I asked. He looked down. Mrs. Lauren Monroe. That was the moment I felt something close inside me, like a door locking from the wrong side. I walked home that day under a sky that had too much light for the sadness I carried. I told myself maybe he was busy, maybe he forgot, but mothers know. We always do. That same night, I wrote a line in my notebook, one I didn't understand until now. When love stops knocking, pride answers. And pride doesn't open the door. I didn't know it then, but that was the rehearsal for the real heartbreak. The text that said 0. It didn't start with a number. It started with a distance. A slow pulling away I mistook for adulthood. He wasn't growing up. He was growing out of me. That night, I sat by my window and listened to the city hum. Every light outside seemed to have a purpose. Mine didn't. I made another promise to myself, quiet but solid. If the world had decided to break me, it should have done it years ago. Not now. Not when I've already learned how to survive every kind of loss except this one. Tomorrow, I would stop remembering and start moving. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to wait for someone to save me. Not my son, not a miracle, not even God. I was going to learn what justice feels like when it wears my name. The morning after my promise, I went straight to Brenda's porch. She already had her laptop open, steam rising from a chipped mug of coffee. I handed her my phone. I think my son's been using my name. She squinted at the screen, clicking slow. Within minutes, she found the trail. 5 wires, neat as a confession. Each transfer landed in the same account. Michael A. Monroe. Same date each month, same time of day. She showed me how to pull the statements, how to print the proof. When the paper came out, warm from the machine, I felt like it burned. My name was there beside his, joint owner, a signature that looked like mine but wasn't. He'd practiced it. My own son had practiced being me. Brenda whispered, Ellie, this isn't a mistake. It's a plan. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the only way to keep from breaking in half. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and spread the papers out like cards in a bad deck. $81,340. 6 months of careful stealing. Not a robbery. An erosion. I thought of every meal skipped, every overtime shift, every prayer I whispered so he could sleep better. I called Walter. His voice was steady. We'll handle it legally. No shouting, no chaos. Good. Because my kind of revenge didn't need noise. I bought a new notebook, red as blood and warning. On the first page I wrote, He took my money quietly, so I'll take it back the same way. Then I closed it. The war had already begun. And this time, I wasn't the one begging. The morning sun didn't feel warm that day. It felt like judgment. My hands hurt. My breath came shorter than usual, and even coffee tasted like metal. Still, I got dressed, tied my scarf, and walked to the clinic on Florence Avenue. Dr. Harris was kind, but quiet. That's how you know something's wrong. When the doctor who always talks about football won't look you in the eye. He shuffled the papers in front of him, sighing the way people do when they wish they were anywhere else. Ellie, he said softly, your white cell count is extremely high. The scans confirm it's leukemia. Advanced. I stared at the printout. Black letters on white paper. My name at the top. The word positive beside the code that meant ending. How long? I asked. He hesitated. 6 months if untreated. Maybe longer if we begin chemotherapy immediately. I smiled, not because I was brave, but because I had finally run out of fear. Will it hurt? He blinked, surprised by the question. Yes, but it could give you time. Time, I repeated, tasting the word like a foreign spice. "Doctor, I've already spent 68 years earning it. I think I'll use what's left my own way." He frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning," I said. "I've got work to finish before I let death clock out with my name." I walked out of that clinic without a prescription, just my purse and my purpose. The air outside felt sharper, cleaner, like God had opened a window for me to think straight. I went home, boiled water for tea, and watched the steam curl toward the ceiling. I thought of every year I spent waiting for life to apologize. It never did. So maybe I'd stop apologizing too. When Walter called to check on the bank paperwork, I told him everything. The diagnosis, the timeline, the plan I hadn't said out loud yet. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "Ellie, if you're running out of time, let's make sure you spend it taking back what's yours." That night, I opened my red notebook again. The pages smelled faintly of ink and courage. I wrote, "If my body is leaving me, my dignity will stay. I will not die begging. I will not die silent. I will die seen." Then I folded the doctor's report and tucked it inside the cover. Not as evidence of sickness, but as permission. For once, I wasn't afraid of endings. Endings are just doors that make sure lessons don't escape. Tomorrow I'd start moving pieces. Calls to the bank, paperwork with Walter, a visit to Brenda for signatures. I didn't know if I had 6 months or 6 weeks, but however long it would be mine. The morning after my diagnosis, I didn't cry. I brewed coffee, pulled out the stack of stolen bank statements, and set them on the table like a deck of cards I was finally ready to play. The game wasn't about anger anymore. It was about precision. I called Walter Kane. He picked up on the first ring. "You ready?" he asked. "I've been ready since the day he hit transfer." Walter was retired, but his mind hadn't rusted. He came by with a briefcase full of papers and an old fountain pen that clicked like memory. We spread everything across my kitchen table. Transactions, dates, forged signatures. He looked through each page slowly, careful, like handling evidence from a crime scene that still bled. "Ellie," he said finally, "this isn't just stealing. This qualifies as elder financial abuse. There's a clause that lets us freeze all associated accounts pending investigation." "Even if he's out of the country?" He nodded. "Especially if he is." The plan was simple. File a preemptive complaint with the California Department of Financial Protection, attach the notarized proof, and trigger a provisional hold. If we moved fast, the freeze would reach London before he could withdraw another cent. Brenda came over to notarize the forms. Her hands trembled when she stamped the first page. "Ellie, are you sure about this?" "I'm sure about breathing," I said. "Everything else is negotiable." By noon, the complaint was filed. By 3, Walter got an email from a contact at the bank. "Provisional hold activated. Review pending within 72 hours. I exhaled for the first time in days. I imagined my son trying to swipe his card in some London cafe. The machine beeping declined, his confidence cracking like glass. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming gravity. He had turned me into air, invisible, light, easy to ignore. Freezing the money made me solid again. That night, I wrote in my red notebook. He took my savings, thinking it would make me small. But power doesn't live in dollars. It lives in knowing where to cut the cord. I slept early, without nightmares. The street outside buzzed with the same noise it always had. Dogs barking, sirens in the distance, a baby crying next door. But for the first time, none of it entered me. I was a closed door, a quiet storm waiting for the right sky. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. Paperwork was just the prelude. The rest would be silence, the kind that teaches. I turned off the light, touched the notebook once, and whispered to the dark, "Let him feel what I felt. Not broke, but empty." 3 days after Walter filed the papers, the silence started to travel. From my little house in Los Angeles to a cafe in London. I didn't need to be there to know how it happened. I could see it in my mind, clear as day. Michael sitting in a leather booth, sunlight on his wristwatch, Lauren across from him, snapping a picture for her story. Breakfast in Covent Garden. He hands his card to the waiter. Swipe. Declined. He laughs it off, tries another. Declined again. Lauren's smile disappears before the receipt does. Try mine, she says. But her card chirps the same way. That tiny beep, the sound of my justice arriving right on time. I pictured the color leaving his face, the quiet panic of a man realizing the air around him isn't free. They go to an ATM, no cash, call the bank, no help. Then comes the email. Account frozen pending elder abuse review. Those words weigh more than any slap. Lauren starts to pace. Candace mutters something about incompetence. By dinner, the panic has become blame. You said this was safe, Lauren hisses. You said your mother wouldn't even know how to log in. She doesn't, Michael stammers. She couldn't have. But he stops mid-sentence. Because somewhere deep down, he knows I could. He's just never seen me choose to. That night, I imagine him sitting by the hotel window, watching buses crawl through London traffic, his phone buzzing with messages from the wife who's already stopped calling him babe. He dials my number. The call comes through at 2:47 a.m. My time. I let it ring twice, then answer. His voice is small, almost the child I used to know. Mom, what did you do? I stay quiet. He breathes hard, half sob, half anger. You ruined everything. You froze my accounts. You're insane. No, Michael, I say softly. You just finally met the part of me that's sane. I hate you, he whispers. The words don't sting. They just land where love used to live. I know, I say, but someday you'll understand. And then I hang up. Outside, the streetlight flickers like applause. Inside, I pour a glass of water and sip it slow. For the first time in months, it tastes clean. I look at the red notebook on my table and write one more line. He called me crazy, but it was the first time he said my name without money in his mouth. Then I close it, turn off the lamp and whisper to the dark. Let the silence finish what I started. London rain has a way of making everything look honest. By morning, the clouds were heavy, and so was Michael's shame. He hadn't slept. Lauren hadn't stayed. She packed while he stared at the window. No arguments, no tears, just the sound of zippers and endings. Where will you go? He asked. Somewhere with working credit cards, she said. Then she was gone. Candace followed soon after, muttering something about bad genes and poor judgment. And just like that, my son's perfect little world emptied faster than my savings once had. He called the bank again, but policy doesn't negotiate with regret. The funds were locked, the account under review, and every road he thought was paved with charm had turned to gravel. He wandered the streets that afternoon, Piccadilly, Leicester Square, all those names that sound fancy until you're broke under their signs. His shoes soaked through. His pride cracked open. He sat on a bench, watching strangers hurry by with lives that still made sense. That's where I picture him when I think of karma. Not in handcuffs, not in pain. Just still, long enough to see himself for the first time. He pulled out his phone and opened the gallery. Photos of Lauren kissing his cheek, Candace holding champagne, me smiling beside him on his graduation day. Back then, my arm was around him like I believed we were a team. Now, looking at that picture, he could see it. My eyes were already tired of being proud. That night, he checked into a cheap hostel near King's Cross. Shared room, flickering light, metal bunk beds that squealed every time someone turned over. He laid there, staring at the ceiling, listening to other people breathe. He didn't cry. Not yet. Shame takes time to thaw. He reached for the red notebook I had mailed to the embassy after our call. On the first page, my handwriting waited for him. My son, you thought you could take what I earned without losing what I taught. But I raised you to understand weight. Now you'll learn what it feels like to carry it. He read the line 3 times, the ink blurring where his thumb pressed too hard. The smell of lavender drifted from the paper. I'd rubbed it there on purpose, so even my anger would smell like home. He closed the book and whispered, "I'm sorry," but the room was too empty to hear him. And me? I sat by my window in Los Angeles, listening to the same rain, oceans away. I didn't know he'd read the letter that night, but I felt something ease in my chest, like a door unlocking quietly between us. Not forgiveness, not yet. Just space. The kind you need before the truth finally fits. When the rain finally stopped, I could breathe again. Not because London was dry, I've never been there, but because somewhere deep in my bones, I knew the storm had crossed the ocean and found my son. For days, there was silence. No calls, no apologies, just peace. And I held it close, like a fragile thing that could break if I looked at it too long. I spent that week back in my little kitchen, moving slow, letting the light spill through the window like mercy. The kettle hissed, the clock ticked, and the house for once didn't sound lonely. Then one morning, a letter arrived, stamped in blue ink, from the U.S. Embassy in London. Inside was a copy of the final statement. Account permanently closed, funds returned, investigation resolved, and a single note written in Walter's familiar handwriting. He's coming home. I read it twice, then folded it neatly, sliding it into my red notebook. Not because I needed proof, but because even victories feel smaller when there's no one left to celebrate them with. That evening, Brenda brought soup and news. She'd heard through a friend that Michael had been seen at the airport. Thinner, quieter, unshaven. "Maybe he's learned something," she said softly. I smiled. "Maybe," I whispered. But lessons don't stick unless they scar. 2 weeks later, I heard a soft knock on my door. No words, just the sound of hesitation. When I opened it, no one was there. Only a brown paper bag sitting on the porch. Inside were glazed donuts, still warm. My favorite kind. I didn't need a note to know who left them. A mother's heart doesn't need confirmation. It just knows. I didn't open the door. Not that day. Some wounds have to heal in silence before forgiveness can sit down. Still, every morning after that, the bag was there. Sometimes donuts, sometimes flowers, sometimes nothing but a folded piece of paper with a verse from Proverbs written in shaky handwriting. He was trying, and I let him. Because love doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it just means witness. My body was giving up faster than I expected. The medicine barely kept the nights soft. Walter came every few days, checking mail, refilling prescriptions, pretending not to notice how my hands shook more each time. "You're a hard woman to kill," he said once, trying to make me laugh. I did, but quietly. I could feel death circling me like a cat that already owned the room. One evening, I asked him for a favor. "When it's time," I said, "don't let anyone put me in one of those big funeral homes. I want the wake here, in this house. Keep it small, just the neighbors. And if he comes, don't stop him." Walter's jaw tightened. "Are you sure you want that?" "I'm sure about peace," I said. "Everything else is just noise." He nodded, didn't argue. That's how you know someone loves you, when they let you finish your story your way. That night, I couldn't sleep. The pain wasn't cruel, just heavy, like carrying everything I'd ever forgiven on my chest. I got up, lit a candle, and opened my red notebook one last time. The pages were filled with pieces of me, dates, receipts, letters, thoughts I'd never said out loud. On the final page, I wrote slowly, each word like a step toward release. "My son, love is not demanded, it is given. If you have learned that, then you are not lost anymore. Do not look for me when I am gone. I will be in every mistake you choose not to repeat. If you wish to forgive yourself, start by being kind to someone who can't repay you. And when you see a mother struggling, don't turn away. Look her in the eyes. That will be my redemption. I signed it. Eleanor May Monroe. Then I folded the page, slipped it into an envelope, and wrote his name on the front. For Michael. I set it on the table beside the candle and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the crickets were singing their midnight hymns. Somewhere far away, a siren wailed, then faded into quiet. And just like that, I drifted off. When the neighbors found me the next morning, I was still sitting upright, the candle burned to nothing, the red notebook open beside me, and a faint smile resting on my face. They said the room smelled of lavender. Maybe it was the pages. Maybe it was peace. Michael came later that afternoon. No one called him. He just knew. He stood at the door for a long time before walking in. He didn't cry loud, didn't touch the body. He just knelt beside me, pressed his forehead to my hand, and whispered, "I'm sorry." On the table, he found the envelope. He opened it with trembling fingers and read every word aloud, his voice cracking in the places where I had once prayed for him. He didn't notice the neighbors watching from the doorway, or Walter standing behind them, hat in hand. He just kept reading, his tears falling onto the same ink that had carried mine. When he finished, he folded the letter back carefully, as if even regret deserved gentleness. He saw the photo tucked beneath it, him as a little boy, missing 2 front teeth, holding a toy airplane made of cardboard and tape. On the back, in faded ink, I had written, "I still believe in you, son." He clutched that photo to his chest and sobbed like a child who finally understood the price of love. After the burial, he didn't sell the house, didn't move, didn't repaint the walls or throw away my old armchair. He just lived there, quietly. The neighbors said he worked at a community center, teaching local kids how to manage money, helping women open small savings accounts so no one could ever take what was theirs again. Every Sunday, he left a single flower by my grave, a lavender stem, always lavender. And though I wasn't there to see it, I like to think that in the end, he finally saw me, not as the mother he outgrew, but as the mirror he'd been avoiding his whole life. Some say death takes everything. They're wrong. It only takes what you refuse to leave behind. I left love, written in ink and silence. I left lessons carved into a son's heart. And most of all, I left proof that dignity doesn't die. Not when it's earned, not when it's fought for, not when it's passed on. Because sometimes justice isn't a gavel. Sometimes it's a smile in an old photograph, a handprint on a doorknob, a red notebook full of truth. And somewhere in a small house on the edge of Los Angeles, a man sits in a creaking armchair, reading those pages aloud, not for forgiveness, but for faith. Faith that one day he'll deserve the woman who taught him what it means to lose everything and still walk away whole. Did you like this story? And which city are you listening from? Let me know in the comments. And if it touched your heart, tap that super thanks to keep stories like this alive. Until next time, I'm Ellie. Signing off with love, forgiveness, and a little lavender.